Okay, guys, welcome back. I am here with Alex Coper, who is CEO of Moxie Lending.
Yep.
Moxie Global, right?
Moxie Mortgage, Moxie Global, sure.
Okay, nice. And we're going to talk about financing in Mexico, specifically for expats, Americans, Canadians looking to get loans to buy real estate here in Mexico. So, Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm really happy to be here. It's a beautiful day. You pick great shoot locations. Like this direction reminds me of Mexico City. This direction's got the great Cabo arches.
Yeah, no, the video is not
Fantastic.
going to do it justice. We don't have any shortage of beautiful locations here in Cabo, that's for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
So to get started, before we started filming, we were talking, I want to learn what's new, but it sounds like you guys have been almost growing like double every year for the past 3 years. So what's new with Moxie?
Yeah. So first of all, it's fantastic to be here. Great to have an opportunity to connect with you and folks that may watch or listen to this at some point. So Moxie is focused specifically on lending to U.S. citizens secured by property in Mexico. And we've been around under our predecessor name for a total of about 4 years. In 2020, we doubled our volume from 19. In 2021, we doubled again. 2022, we doubled again. We're on pacing to do the same thing this year. I think that's really a product of two things. One, the Moxie team's fantastic. We have folks all over the U.S., kind of remotely based. We have folks here in Los Cabos, as well as other team members remote in other parts of Mexico. And our team works really hard for clients in providing financing solutions, right? So fixed interest rate, 25-year term, U.S. dollar originated mortgages secured by Mexico real estate. And it's something that historically hasn't really existed, at least in the form that we do it, which is really high quality, reasonably priced, right? And ensuring peace of mind and security for clients. That's not always been the case. It's not always been around, right? So I think our biggest opportunity is making sure the world knows we exist. And so what we've seen, part of that increase in business has just been awareness, people understanding that Moxie exists, and the product set that we offer and some of the changes we've made that have been positive for customers. But also we're reaching kind of a new segment now, and that's people that already own property in Mexico that are U.S. citizens that maybe when they bought the house, we didn't exist or they didn't know we existed. And now, with kind of market conditions in the United States, people want liquidity, right? So we're doing a lot more refinance and cash out refinance transactions now as well, which has been cool. So that's just that kind of high level.
How much of the business is percentage-wise is like cash out refinancing versus like originating a loan?
Yeah, so last year we were like 90-something% purchase transactions, right? So all new customers. In the fourth quarter of last year, first quarter of this year, our refi mix has gone from less than 10% to like 25%.
Okay.
So it's a modest, well, it's a big increase, but it's a modest percentage still. And I think it's more just folks finding out that that's an option for them. That coupled with sort of people wanting liquidity out of an asset that they thought was always going to be illiquid, right? And we do cash out refinance, but also, folks sometimes take developer financing, right? And a lot of times the developer financing has, a balloon payment or short term, and they want a long term, fixed rate, fixed payment kind of for 25 years. So we do, rate and term refinance as well. So that's been picking up a little bit. And then on the purchase side, we continue to kind of expand our purview as far as the markets we lend in. We were initially really focused in on the Baja in general. And then we started to do transactions in Mexico City, in San Miguel de Allende, in Bucerias, Puntamita, Sayulita, Puerto Vallarta, all of these markets where U.S. citizens are buying property or refinancing it.
Nice. Okay. Well, first of all, 100% agree that there has been a lack of financing for foreigners, and it's probably the most common question I get. And a lot of people are disappointed when they don't have like their conventional U.S. loan that they're used to, but now that is available.
Yeah, that's what we bring to the table, right? Is we understand the legal property transfer process in Mexico. We have, great lawyers on staff, right, and that we partner with. And so we take painstaking steps to make sure that customers are protected, that they actually own what they're buying. And so clients get that from Moxie, agents get that from Moxie, but also they get this mortgage product and process that U.S. citizens are used to, right? So we originate mortgages using very similar software that a U.S. mortgage lender would originate. The loans we originate are in U.S. dollars. The interest rates are fixed. There's no kind of funny business, right? Which I think is common. So essentially, there's nothing foreign about it, even though, except for the collateral, I suppose, right? The subject property that we're making the loan on is obviously foreign, but the loan itself feels like something that a U.S. citizen would be used to when getting a mortgage kind of in their home country.
Yeah. Man, it seems like you guys have expanded. Last time it was really like Cabo, Vallarta, maybe San Miguel de Allende, and now Mexico City, Riviera Maya.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because Mexico City has had a lot of, remote work, kind of like New York style. They're like, why would I pay $4,000 a month in Manhattan when I can go to Mexico City? For better or for worse, there's been a lot of people moving there. What types of people? You're doing loans in Mexico City now as well as Riviera Maya, correct?
Yeah, so now we've expanded from a credit policy perspective. We've expanded the guidelines more or less to lend across the country, so anywhere and everywhere. We had some restrictions in the past around title insurance. So in the eastern part of the country, like in Riviera Maya, Tulum, Cancun, we have a carve out to be able to lend there now. So in fact, one of our recent marketing posts is like Hola Cancun, right? Because we just sort of made an entry into that market. So for all intents and purposes, we don't have any restrictions on geography. Obviously, there's elements of our credit policy, like minimum loan size, and then elements of the property itself that we require from a diligence perspective to be in good shape. Some of those are Mexico-specific items that, at the end of the day, protect the buyer, right? Making sure that they own what they're paying for, and that it's properly registered in the eyes of this country's laws. So yeah, a lot of growth geographically speaking. As it relates to Mexico City, it's interesting. There's definitely some digital nomads that we're starting to see more and more. Mexico City is one of my favorite places to visit. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to tell you a city in Mexico. I don't. That's not my favorite. But anyway, yeah, seeing a lot of growth kind of across the board.
All right. So let's get into rates, how much is down, loan to value. So for an example, I'm thinking of a listing that my company has, let's say like a nice house, golf course, $700,000. What would the typical loan that you guys do look like for a property like that? How much down? And I know it depends on your credit, but let's just say we're going to focus on somebody that has really good credit. What usually are they going to put down, and what sort of interest rates and fees and process timing, things like that?
Yep, great question. So on a $700,000 single family home, condo, penthouse, villa, even if it's a 2-unit, client's going to put down 35%. That's required, the minimum amount required down. Plus they're going to have to pay their closing costs, right? So transfer tax, all of that. And then we'll lend the rest. The loans we make are all in US dollars. And what's interesting is not only do we originate the loan in US dollars, but we also service it in US dollars. Moxie uses a subservicer in the United States, who kind of mails out statements, collects payments, and sends a 1098 INV, which is like a mortgage interest form at the end of every year to the IRS. So, some clients have reported to us they've been able to deduct the mortgage interest they pay to Moxie on their U.S. income tax return. Clients should definitely chat with their CPA about that. I'm not a tax attorney at all, but that's kind of a cool feature. Anyway, so Moxie would originate a loan for up to 65% of the purchase price, or appraised value, whichever is lower. credit scores, generally good credit, so 700 FICO or better. Client would submit documentation, tax returns, bank statements, W-2s, things like that, to our underwriting team. We would usually decision, as long as we have all the documentation that we ask for in the application, we would decision that like in less than a week. And then we would go and order a title search, an appraisal. Our legal team would work with the agent, with the seller, with the buyer, do all the KYC. Our fastest closing we've ever done has been less than 30 days, which is kind of amazing. Some of them take longer, but our process, like from a lending perspective, is actually really fast. So we've brought a lot of technology into the process, which is not something that we typically see, to sort of expedite and bifurcate out the various different tasks that have to get done in a real estate transaction, in a legal real estate transaction in Mexico for a foreigner. We have that kind of all automated by our system, but we work closely with a lot of folks in our on our team and a lot of vendors to make that happen pretty quickly. So in summary, 35% down would be required plus the closing costs. Moxie would lend up to 65% of the 700,000 in the example you gave. The interest rates depend on three factors. One is the FICO score, so the higher your credit score, the lower the interest rate you would get. The loan to value, so the more you put down, the lower the risk of the loan, the higher, the lower the interest rate would be. And then the loan size. So Moxie lends from 250,000 US dollars all the way up to 2.5 million US dollars. And so the higher the loan is, the more you borrow essentially, the lower the interest rate is. But generally that range is fairly compressed. It changes based on market conditions. And so today, if a client were closing, they'd probably be somewhere in the 7, 8, maybe 9% range, depending on one of those factors. Tomorrow, that could be totally different based on market conditions. But once the loan signs and the transaction closes, right, the escrow closes, that rate is fixed for 25 years.
Yeah, no variable rates, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just went over what the typical lending process would be like for, let's say, a $700,000 purchase. What types of fees would be associated with that, and how much different would that be than like a conventional loan if you were getting something at a typical U.S. Major bank?
That's a great question. I think one of the most maybe surprising aspects of a foreigner buying real estate in Mexico is the amount of closing costs that are required here, right? There's transfer tax, there's the notario fees, right? There's the title search. There's a number of elements that foreigners are not accustomed to. In the United States, maybe if you buy real estate, maybe you expect to pay about 1% in closing costs, maybe less. You're not going to pay any origination fees for your loan, or probably not. Here, that's different, right? And I think most agents will educate their clients up front, so Moxie's not necessarily the first people ever to share that information. But sometimes that's not the case, and there can be sticker shock in looking at all of those fees, costs, and charges associated with the closing. If for a client paying cash or taking a Moxie loan, there are only a couple of differences in the fees, right? So a lot of the fees, costs, and charges that apply in a Moxie transaction apply in a cash transaction. For example, a cadastral appraisal, and the notario fees, recording charges, so on and so forth. At Moxie, there's an origination fee, which is a percentage of the loan amount, and then an underwriting fee, application fee, some kind of fixed fees. But I think, moreover, it's always really important for clients to understand, and we do this really well. Like, we spend a lot of time educating our clients on not only our fees, but more importantly, like on all of the fees that are going to apply in the transaction, both upfront and on an ongoing basis. We actually have on our website a very detailed fee letter that people, it's a dense document, but people really enjoy it because it's everything that could potentially impact you from a fee, cost, and charge perspective all in one place, and in terms that a U.S. citizen would understand. So I think that's a really important question, and is something that we educate clients on regularly.
Yeah, no, and it's so for me, if I'm thinking about it, I personally would say like here in Cabo, maybe 5% of the transactions are financed. And we had the situation where we were using financing and we sent our closing attorney, a closing cost estimate. And then the one came from the financing, and there was a significant difference, and the buyer was like, why is this different? So I'm just curious, in the spread, or in the future, do you think that spread closes a little bit as more and more loans get originated and it becomes to look more like a conventional loan? Because I speak for a lot of people here in the real estate market that I 100% want it to become the norm. Mm-hmm. Because it's very hard to have somebody get excited about a property here and then realize that they cannot do financing, or it's just different, right? And I know the more and more the Moxies and other companies stick around and do good business, the more it becomes a more normalized process, and possibly that spread decreases a bit.
Yeah, good point. I think one thing I would say is understand that Moxie, at least, is a financial institution. So we're regulated by the Bank Commission in Mexico and by Conducef, which is like a consumer protection regulator in Mexico. So financial institutions were required to disclose almost like a worst case scenario, right? Every single possible charge, fee, cost that could possibly come up, we're required to disclose it. So it always is going to look a little more intense than maybe a closing cost worksheet or estimate that's prepared by a broker. And I think that's important, right? Consumers, especially U.S. consumers, are used to that when they're, taking out financing products in the United States. They want to see every possibility. And what we do systemically, like within our loan origination system, is that as invoices come in from various vendors, we update the cash to close estimate and regenerate it automatically through the system to the borrower. So it's in real time. I think the other thing about Moxie specifically, and I can't speak to other finance companies, is that we don't mark up the costs of any of those services. So an appraisal, a title search, like whatever the vendor charges for that is what appears on the settlement statement. Whatever the notario is that the buyer and seller agree on in the transaction, that's who Moxie will use, and whatever they charge is what will appear on the settlement statement, right? So there's no sort of markup on any of those, nothing hidden. That's at least our philosophy, is being really, really transparent. From a financing perspective, I mean, there is cost to operate a lender and to do the diligence that we do, but I do think in the future, as it becomes more ubiquitous and financing becomes more prevalent, for foreigners specifically, I think you'll definitely see, at scale, right?
Yeah.
Each individual cost doesn't need to be as high, right? Because you can operationalize and batch it. So
exactly.
But yeah, I think that's. I would just say, if that situation ever comes up, at least whether it's with Moxie or someone else, reach out to us, right? Because that's what we do, is we do a lot of education. There's a whole, sort of other world of vendors that are required in order to legally close a transaction. And we understand that intimately. And we're, kind of happy to educate and walk folks through it. Financing might not be right for everyone, right? And so I think what's really important, though, is the upfront disclosure of that, right? And being able to make an informed choice. But ultimately, it makes the dream come true for people, right? That otherwise might not be able to. Provides liquidity for an asset that ordinarily would be a cash market. And I think what's interesting is, in the past, interest rates have been really low in the United States. People have been able to refinance their home at home and take out cash and bring it here and buy cash, or use a home equity line of credit. I was speaking at an event last month, and we had a slide in the presentation, and it showed what a $500,000 home equity line of credit, what the payment on that would be monthly a year ago versus now. It's more than doubled, right? So the power of like a fixed rate long-term mortgage loan is pretty significant. And the other thing, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, like you definitely get what you pay for as it relates to like vendors and services. And there, isn't really a free lunch when it concerns quality. So I've noticed that for sure. And so I think our clients have come, and our real estate partners have come to appreciate like they can consistently rely on Moxie to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, right? Which is important.
Yeah. And that's something that's very true. The spread between what people in the U.S. were borrowing at compared to what was lended here was much larger than it is today. As interest rates have risen in the United States, it's almost negligible at this point.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Like our Moxie's rates, like today, again, it depends on the market, but Moxie's rates today, and we lend on owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied, second home, regardless of the occupancy. There's no adjustment in price for that. They're on par with non-QM mortgage rates in the U.S. So,
all right. Well, Alex, thanks for your time. It seems like business is booming, been doubling pretty much every year, which is good. You're expanding to different areas of Mexico, and I look forward to just the loan to the foreigner becoming much more commonplace here, and you guys are a huge part of that. So thank you for your time, and before we get rolling, let us know where we can get some more information.
Definitely, I'll do that. The other thing I'll just mention, we just launched last week a new calculator kind of, and we built it specifically for Mexico. And so clients can go onto our website, which is where this calculator is, and they can estimate not only the monthly payment for the mortgage, the Fideicomiso, the hazard insurance, right, all of those things, but also their cash to close, right? And they can see in real time sort of what that cool little pie chart that comes up with, what would be included in the payment, that sort of thing. So make sure to get you the links so you can post it along with this. But yeah, I would say clients that have interest in looking into Moxie's products and programs, just visit us, our website, moxie.global. I'm happy to help.
Moxie.global. Awesome, Alex. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And look forward to the next one.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.